But what you've also got is you've got all your sweaty bodies, or glowy, I suppose, girls don't sweat, do they? All your bodies are lying on top of this, and they're creating heat. There's an awful lot of heat created off of this, and you've got the colder water on the outside. And a 40-day passage with this in such confined, damp, horrible conditions is more than you'd expect on a yacht for a number of years. What I've said, and for the cost of it, I think it's worthwhile. And that 6 seconds that you get in that clunk is when the thing gets to the end of its travel, and then it changes and then goes back. And we're actually making water. You can see it. I won't pull it out because I get water everywhere, but there's water coming out of that pipe, and that's your production pipe, which you will have probably going into a big jerry can, and you'll probably run it for half an hour a day or something for your needs. It makes, they say it makes 30 litres an hour, but it actually makes about 26, 28. There's two factors on all Watermakers. One is the saltiness of the water. So the saltier the water, the more dense it is, so the less you're going to make. The warmer the water, the less dense it is. So the saltiness and the warmness of the water are the factors. If we did one of these for Jock Wishart's Road to the Pole, I don't know if you followed that a couple of years ago, and we had to set the pressure switch here, which I'll come to in a minute, at a much higher cutout rate because the water was that much colder, and it would be cutting out before you actually make water. When you turn the machine on, turn the machine off, it's critically important that you turn it off on a clunk. Now the reason for that, this thing's shuttling backwards and forwards, as I showed you there. I could do it all day and I'd never make it happen, but trust me, you guys will do it straight away. If you stop it bang dead centre, because it's hydraulic, there'd be no advantage on either side when you went to start it up again, and you'd find the machine would either go straight to high pressure and shut down, or it just wouldn't reprime itself. So that's why you always shut it down when you hear a clunk. It doesn't. The Catadyne's a completely different unit, but it's with the Schenker, the Spectra. I'm not sure with the Baytech, but there'll be something along those lines there. I mean, did you speak to Jim Cudd? No. You really want to have how the Watermaker sort of works there. I'm going to go back to electrics again now because I think this is really important, and I'll give you some troubleshooting tips. This is a pressure switch here. Your unit won't look quite like this. All those component parts are going to be built around the Watermaker in the floor, most of them, certainly the Woodvale ones. Your filter housing will be one of those. It'll be a tiny blue one with a white, instead of that stainless steel, it'll be white, and it'll all be built around the Watermaker. Jamie from Brixton did them outside. There's none of Jamie's, none of you got Jamie's boat?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah? Right, yours, I think the Watermaker's more exposed. And you, I think, may have one like this, where it's all on one. Jamie normally did a really nice installation, he put a nice cover over it, with a couple of wing nuts on the bottom that you could take this out easily. So if you needed to change a filter or change that, you could do it quite easily. The only downside is, if yours isn't under the floor, is it is susceptible if you did leave the hatch open and got a waving, because it's more exposed. Whereas the other one, the Woodvale ones, because they were under that hatch, they were less likely to get flooded. But you've got the same components in both units. Now what they are, this is a pressure switch here. Now that is a safety device that will cut in at 9.5 bar. If there's a blockage in the system here, what will happen is this will go up to 9.5 bar on the pressure gauge here, and then this will cut in and the machine will stop. If it didn't, what would happen was it would keep increasing in pressure until something went pop, and it would probably be one of these pipes, would probably pop off, but it'd make a hell of a bang, it'd give you a hell of a shock. Okay, so that's the pressure switch, which is, you can't really all see it. If it's the Schenker people, if you come around here because it's more important to you guys, this is wired into this grey box here. Now, there you've got a relay. Can you see it? This black relay. Okay. So the pressure switch works with the relay and turns the machine off. Now, if you take your electrics back to basics, you've got 4 wires here. 2 of them are attached to a fan, which is not critical, but that's your positive and your negative going to your pump. And they come in and they're wired in via this the pressure switch and this relay. If for any reason you're out there, and I mean, I guess you'd do it after you spoke to me or someone on the phone, but if you found that there was no electrics to the Watermaker, we do go through several tests, we'd try to work out if you had a faulty pressure switch or perhaps a faulty relay. And if that's the case, all isn't lost, because you can bypass this. Okay, so you need to get to the box, and really all you need to do is follow that black wire and that red wire, and instead of having them going through this relay, you just make sure that they're attached to the negative and the positive there. Okay, so it's a way of doing away with the safety device, but if you did have a fault on one of those two items, that's what you would do. Does anybody got any problems with that? It's quite straightforward. But I know what it's like when you're on a little boat and you're bobbing around and you're feeling sick and everything. It's not the best time to be doing it. But all those electrics, you can cut all of it out and you go the very basic. You have got a pump with a positive and a negative wire. And all of the rest of this is superfluous. It is a good safety device, but it will work without it. The only thing was, without it, probably what you'd find, you'd want to make sure that you keep an eye on the gauge here, because if it does start to overpressure, then it's not going to have any means of stopping it. One of the problems on rowing, that's the electrics done pretty well. This is the accumulator, by the way. It looks very flash, but it's really a simple piece of equipment. Inside there is half a bladder, which is pressurized to 42 psi. And if you see that, it's just a standard car inner tube inflator. And that's how it's pumped up. All it's doing is pressurizing the system so that between cycles you don't get a massive drop either side. It just keeps the whole system pressurized. Any of you from a sailing background with yachts? No? I won't tell you that. Now, we use it on yachts for the domestic water system. So you turn on your tap on a boat and then you hear the pressure water thing kick in. If you didn't have an accumulator there, you'd find it would be running all the time. But that brings it to a pressure and keeps everything nice and smooth. So that it will work without that. So if I deflated that completely, as long as there's not a hole in it and it's leaking, it will still work. But you will notice that between the cycles, the needle would move a lot more. Some of these units, they're pre-made part. I'll just go through. Occasionally, these have been known to leak. There's a series of screws all the way around, and there's a gasket in the middle. If you have got a leak, and again, this is more critical for those where you've got everything under the floor. And I would say that you, at least once a day, somebody just lifts the floor, lifts that hatch up, and just goes around with a torch, and just has a quick look to make sure you haven't got a leak. Because with all this stuff in there, it doesn't take too long. And you look at all the connections you've got. You've got one there, there's some here, there's another one down. There's there and there's there. You've got all these connections on here. There's always sources that could cause a leak, and it wouldn't take too much with a boat being rocked around and a leak before you ended up with this motor underwater. I'd also recommend that you put a sponge, big old-fashioned yellow sponge, in the bottom of that compartment. So if you have got any water that's collecting in there, at least it'll all be contained in the sponge. Okay. Charlie picture. Your boat is very close to the surface of the sea. You've got nothing under it, you've got no keel, you've got, I mean, a yacht's a metre and a half below. So your water intake is at sea level, at water level. And when it gets rough, there is a really good chance that you will start sucking air. I mean, there's ways you can try and avoid it, but the only way I've ever seen that works well, and it's probably too late for you guys, is, I don't know if you noticed, Soma was Charlie's boat, wasn't it? The one he's
actually, the Noming guys have got the same sort of
You've got the same system, well you guys are, yeah. Did Charlie build your boat?
No.
No. They've got a reservoir in the front of the boat, you have as well, that they open and flood a compartment, and then the water is then taken from that compartment.
It actually looks like an internal loo.
It does look like a loo. It almost looks like a loo seat on Charlie's. But that works really well, because no matter how rough it is outside and how much the boat is pitching and rolling, you're never sucking water that's got air in it. The rest of you will have to put up with the fact that from time to time, and particularly in rough weather, you'll get either a system block where the machine will stop, and I'm going to replicate one of these now for you, you'll get a system block, and you might have to unblock the machine. The Catadyne,
Probably want to be careful putting your cap on that. So I leave it.
looking there with the Catadyne unit, which you won't because it's got a reservoir, it would self-prime. The Schenker, the Spectra, and I guess the Baytech won't. You generally have to go through a reset procedure. Now, what I'm going to do, I hate doing this in case that
I'll just say that
one's full. You would do with these. There's two versions of the smaller one. You'll either have a little brass screw in the top, which you just undo a couple of turns, and that will bleed. And if you've only got water in up to here, you'll actually, as you unscrew that, you'll see it will go up completely. The pre-filters, I haven't really covered them. You shouldn't really need more than one for the whole trip, but I would carry a spare because they do get blocked. There's a little 5-inch one goes in there, there's a 10-inch one goes in there. To change the pre-filter, you will, with those certainly you'll have a key that would have been supplied. You just unscrew that, take the old one out. One of the things, be careful of, and it almost happened there. Don't just go like that and throw it in the sea, because you've just lost your O-ring. Oops, sorry. You've just lost your O-ring, and you won't ever reseal that. The water will pour out of here, unless you've got some Sikaflex or something like that on board that you can make a seal. But this is one of the problems that the guys with the Trilogy, which became a 4, and they lost their seal before they even got to La Gomera. And I had to make them an O-ring. There's a little tip, you can make O-rings, by the way. If ever you did lose your O-ring and you've got other O-rings around, you can actually cut an O-ring with a knife, get some super glue, put a piece in and glue it together. It's a pain in the ass, but you can do it. But it will never seal as well. You might end up with a little dribble, but it will never seal as well as one of them. So be aware whenever you're changing a filter that there is an O-ring in there, you don't want to lose it. But I would put a brand new filter in before you start, and I think that over the 40 days it will take, the 40 days-ish that it's going to take, we should see it through. But just carry a spare one with you just in case you need it, but you don't need any more than that. Now the Spectra, I don't know how they do it on Spectra, and I don't know how they do it on Baytech, but there will be some sort of system. I think Spectra is the thing you push. This is a repositioning knob here, which is a threaded bar, which if you think of it, that's that there, and this is a little rod that goes up and down in the top. It's very stiff. If you have a system block where the system's stopped dead centre, or you've had air in and you've got an air blockage, the way to clear it is, first of all, you open the small blue lever on this side of the machine. Okay, so what we're doing is we're opening a port. If you can imagine that we've opened a hole there. There's a little pipe with nothing on the end here. So we've opened that, and that allows us to screw in a pad which pushes that all the way across. So I'm going to push it in all the way. You can see there's a tiny bit of water coming out there. That's the water that's in that chamber. If you don't lock that, if you don't open that, you'll be pushing against a closed door, and it won't do anything. So we screw it all the way in. Now this will happen to all of you at least once, unless you're incredibly lucky. So you screw it all the way in. That's how much water came out, just a tiny bit. And then you unscrew it. And very importantly, you shut that, because if you leave that in the open position, start the Watermaker up, you get pure salt water pouring out the other pipe. So that's the procedure for a reset procedure. You screw it all the way in and all the way out. Now, if your machine's a bit cruddy and old, you'll notice that there's two nuts here. Sometimes, if you've got a system block and you can't clear it, you might ring me up and I'll say, you've done a reset procedure and it's not really working. Now, this happened on a new machine with John G, the guy that's just done the John G, somebody or other. He was Tony Humphries supported him just at the same time. Maple, the Canadian guy. Now he had a problem, and it went so far, but it wouldn't go all the way. So what I said to him to do was just get a little shifting spanner. Now those are lock nuts; they're locked against each other, and you can just don't go crazy. You can just give it a little nip up, and if there is a sticking point in there, you'll clear it just by doing it with a spanner, and then again undo it all the way. Now what I'm going to do, I hate this, it's a tempting thing, that's going to be screwed all the way in, and I am hopeful that this pressure switch works, because otherwise you're going to all get wet. Okay, this is, let me get to the side because I can stop it if it's going too far. Give a little way. It should go straight up. You see it go straight up. There we are. Now that's the system block, and it's cut in just between 9 and 10 bar. Now the reason we've got that click going on, there's a small leak somewhere here, because it's only temporary. But that click is where the pressure inside that switch is dropping, and that's when it clicks back on and off. And that's what you've got, that's a high pressure block. And this is the symptom that you would get if you've got air in the system. And you can't do anything with it. So what you would do when you have a system block, I've created it artificially by screwing that knob in and leaving it in. Does everybody understand that? Yeah? First thing you would do, system block, you release the pressure, you then open the small blue lever. It's already screwed in, but I'll pretend I'm screwing it in all the way, and then you unscrew it all the way back, and then you shut that, and then you turn it on. Let it run for a couple of seconds without it being under pressure. This is the pressure relief valve. When it's in this position, there's water going through the machine, but we're not under pressure. This one at the top, this large blue lever here, as I turn it, what I'm doing is, water's finding the easy way out. It's running through the machine, this is open, and instead of going through the membrane under pressure, it's actually finding its own way going out with the brine discharge. So when I close that, I've shut that down, so the water must go through the membrane. And you'll see the pressure will start to work. Your machine should be working between 5 and sort of 8 bar. 8's a bit high, but between 5 and 7.5 bar. And that's the machine working properly again. Does anyone want to, particularly anyone with a Schenker, do you want to actually do a system for that problem? If you have a problem with your O-ring, really you're going to be resorting to hand pumping, and you've got no alternative. That's the nature of the Spectra and the Schenker machines. I mean, they're great machines and they don't very often go wrong. In fact, I don't think we've had, I don't want to tempt anything, but I don't think we've had a total failure with an O-ring on a rowing boat. But again, because some of these boats have had these machines for a number of years, and I don't know what maintenance has been done on them, you are susceptible to that problem. Other than that, the membrane itself, I wouldn't suggest you carry a spare membrane. There's no real need.
What might cause a membrane to get damaged?
Right. Oil is one of the main things. If you see oily water, bear in mind your boats are sitting on the surface. If you're in an oil slick, or there's a lot of oil on the water, don't run a Watermaker. Because these holes, the membrane is a semi-permeable roll of film. I've got loads of tiny little holes in that are small enough for the water molecules to go through, but they're too small for the salt molecules. So oil will block that just like that. I mean, we've seen boats where they've had multiple membrane machines. We had one that sat in the lagoon in St Martin for 3 weeks, and it's really fat, it's like soup, and it's full of super yachts. And we run it every day for 3 weeks, and he managed finally to block it. And when we got the Watermaker back to the UK, the first membrane was blocked solid. The other two were fine because the first one had taken a thing. But you won't make water if there's oil. It will wreck the membrane. The other thing, and don't be tempted to do this as Mr. Simon Chalk was once. While you were waiting to go off, you might have weather issues or something like that. You don't want to run the Watermaker in the marina. You're worried about the water being dirty. It might start up and you might smell nasty. If you're going to put any water through the machine, introduce any water, make sure you use bottled water or Watermaker water. If you use tap water, it's got chlorine in it, and it can wreck a membrane. What we had an issue a number of years ago with Britannia, which was a 12-man boat. They'd made an installation error, and the wiring between the pump and the battery was like bell wire. And it's a long boat, it's much longer than your boat, it's a 12-man boat. And consequently they had a voltage drop. and they were only getting 11 volts to the pump. Okay? So when they run the Watermaker, the quality of the Watermaker, when they did a test on it, these pens should be banned from ocean races. Because everybody, if you're waiting for the race to start, they all go around testing each other's water. And the only people who get the stick is me, and they go, oh, it's terrible, it's really bad. But yeah, so they tested the water, and it was not very nice. So Simon, in his wisdom, plumbed the Watermaker directly into the town quay in Lagonera and turned on the hose to run it through with fresh water. And all he did was destroy the membrane. And the trouble was, when I said the problem over the phone, I said, look, I think it's your wiring, because he had 11 volts. They changed the wiring, but of course they created another problem, because they'd wrecked the membrane. And Muggins here had to fly out with one of these under my arm to change it. They're about 160 quid, they're not that expensive, but it's something you don't want to do. So don't get tap water. And likewise, when you get to the other side and you're preserving the membrane, which is where you add a biocide into the membrane so that the boat can come home okay. What you do, you disconnect the seawater in pipe, you introduce, before the pump, you take a bucket of water with biocide in, suck it through the machine and then shut it down. It's really easy, it's particularly easy to do on a Catadon because it's got a fitting for it. But that's something that you should do on the other side if you want to preserve the membrane.
We'll make sure that's done.
Yeah. Are you familiar with how to do that, to show them when they're out there?
And it's lucky, well, where we come into Waikiki Yacht Club, it's stone's throw from the beach, so we can easily get out of the marina area. And Monterey Marina is incredibly clean water. You get sea otters and stuff in the beginning.
Okay.
But in the UK, then obviously the marinas there are not quite as clean. So it's important to be aware of that.
If I were in a marina and I wanted to get some water to do tests because it's out there, what can I do to take water out of the tap and make it clean enough to run through the
You
machine?
could put it through a carbon filter, but you're far better off going and buying a couple of 5-litre water bottles of mineral
We
water.
can just row out,
Yeah.
get some buckets.
When it's clunking away, there shouldn't be too big a gap between the oscillations once it's up and running. You should just see a gentle flicker. You see that? If you've got on one clunk, you've got quite a big oscillation, on the other clunk you haven't, that's a signal that you might have something going wrong in the top section. It could be like you've got an O-ring issue that's on its way, and it's far better off. I mean, that's an easy issue to solve on the land. But anything that doesn't look right, if it's a shanking machine, give me a ring and I'll talk you through it.
What is included in the spares kit for the shankers?
There's an O-ring kit, which again I kind of question as to whether it's the value of it to a degree because it's so difficult to change the O-rings. But you can change the top O-rings really easily. I suggest you take I think it's a 1/4 inch Allen key. I would also, that'll do those bolts as well. A seals kit, which is a set of O-rings and silicone grease. And it could be that you don't need O-rings, but the top rod's got stuck. And if you take the top rod out, I mean, it's a relatively simple, it's 4 bolts, undo that hose, take that section off, take the pipes off. It's a relatively simple repair to do. If it's in the bottom section, really, it's a no-no because you've got, those rods run the length of the machine and it's all clamped together. You've got 12 O-rings in the bottom section. I don't think you'd be able to do that at sea very easily. I've just seen it. But this one you could do. So you've got an O-ring kit, so you've got the O-rings you need for that. A spare pump and a couple of, on these shore flow pumps, this fitting, they're blue now, which are much better. The older ones are black and they're brittle as hell. And it's really common when you there's one on that side as well. You see that one there? The reduction nipples. And they're really common to break them. I mean, all you need to do is just nip it a little bit with and it just shears. So I'd suggest that you carry at least 1 or 2 of those with your spare pump. Maybe carry a couple of hose barbs, maybe a T. I mean, if those of you with Schenker machines, if you let me know, I'll put a little package together for you of the bits I think that you're likely to need. I wouldn't bother about a spare fan because it'll work without the fan. Maybe a little extra length of hose. Just a spare length of hose in case you have an issue.
I'm not sure.
But other than that, I don't. Oh, if you want to go to town, you could actually carry a spare relay and a pressure switch. I mean, the boats we sponsor, we always make sure that they've got those parts. But as I say, I've shown you how to to bypass that. But there is I mean, we did have a lot of trouble with Team Epoch, the Americans, trying to get them to take that to pieces over the phone, and it was.
It's just easier to go standard from the
yeah,
red black straight to the
red and black. And it's so simple, isn't it? It really is very simple. So that's the Schenker machine. Has anybody got any questions? Or about your Baytech or any of the other ones? As I say, speak to Jim and get a spare motor. I mean, you're pretty bravery because they haven't. That's the mesh filter there.
Dual lock kit.
That's the mesh there, and that sits inside this aluminium housing, and you throw this into the sea. What the girls were experiencing was they were pulling it out afterwards, and all the water that was in the pipe was going, and then they were having to prime it because it had air inside it. So they had this really bright idea of getting a bucket of water from the sea and then putting it in the cockpit and using that as their reservoir. Which in one way sounds quite clever, but remember, you're only taking a very small percentage of the water for drinking, and what's going back into the bucket is the brine discharge, which is the salt of the water that you've taken out. So it's getting slightly saltier and saltier. Now what happened then was, as they were pumping, the more and more salty solution they were getting, the pressure relief valve was operating because it was too high and spraying water everywhere, and they weren't getting any water, and they had a real panic over it, and then they said, well, don't do that. And it worked. They also rang up and said, do you think it'll last the trip? And I said, well, I really don't know, but it did. I mean, they're pretty robust. These. We have had them, we had one broken by rotor recovery, not this race, the race before. And I mean, that is a seriously robust piece of kit, and it's a solder, and he just went, and just broke the whole thing.
But the thing is, because it's only 30 pumps a minute, it's not, you know, you don't have to force it, it's not that hard, but it's just boring and dull to just sit there, just...
So it's another good reason to look after the motor on your Watermaker.
Yeah.
Because if you think that as your penance, screw that one up. Is there anything anybody else wants to know? I think I've covered everything. We can have a play with this now. Pump it. We can all have a go and see what it's like to pump it.
Is there any way to avoid the problem rotor frequent had then? Or do you just have to prime it every time?
I don't know what happened to them. Whether they broke everything on the boat.